back then, I guess it was Career Builders or Monster, whatever it was, OCC.com or whatever that site was back then. So I downloaded every possible job I could find, and then I made a list of everything companies were looking for, and then I went out to get the experience to do that. Because, on the resume, you really only need like one line, and then you just let the person assume that you have more experience. So all I did was I got one line of experience. But that kind of led into this whole community thing for me. So that reading that article back in '94 or something like that, and then I just kept working towards that, and now I kind of stumbled in this community. The way I ended up at the Articulate community was, and it kind of goes to what we'll talk about, I was doing my master's research at Pepperdine on, my project was on communities of practice. And one of the things that was interesting, in our program, most of the people were either in higher ed or public education, and all the corporate people, though, were doing some sort of communities of practice type project. So how do I build some kind of communities at work? And they were all failing. And we were learning in the process, and I thought, I don't want to, I have to do this presentation. I don't want to talk about everything that didn't work. I actually wanted to have like a poster I could show, like an arrow going up, And so I looked at what I was doing with communities of practice, and one of the things that stood out to me was that, communities of practice or communities in general are all about expertise. And so it's about people coming together to become experts. And so I shifted my focus to just expertise. And I thought, okay, what am I an expert at? And then what can I share? And not have, in the past I was doing some of the things that, were brought up in some of the comments. I was trying to build a community and trying to get people involved in that. It wasn't working. So then I shifted my focus to how do I just become an expert and then just share my expertise, since the community is kind of wrapped around that. And then from that, I had no expectations that, that was the other thing, no expectations that anybody would do anything. I would just share. And so then I was looking, okay, what's the easy way to do this and not have to do a lot of work? And so I'm an Articulate user. We had, the place I was working at, we had, I think, 50 or 60 Articulate licenses, and we had all these remote locations. And they'd always call us up for questions, and so I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll build a community around Articulate, and then I can, help them out and share my expertise. It'll be easy, it's work related, so I can do all my schoolwork at work and all that kind of stuff. And then I thought, well, I can't just. One of the things I was doing is I'd go to the Articulate community and kind of glean some of the information from that, and then bring it back to the thing I was building, and because nobody's going to go to the Articulate community, right? And so, so I thought, well, I'll go get the information that I think that the people will need, and then when you're in the Articulate community, the thing is you can't just, part of the community to practice stuff, it's kind of like real relationships, you can't just take and take and take and take. So at that point, I thought, well, I should probably help a little. Actually, I didn't mind helping, I kind of like to help people. And so I made it a goal that every day I would answer 5 questions. And not ask questions, not try to get help, but I would just share 5 things every day or try to help somebody. So 5 times a day. And the thing was, I'm on the West Coast, like all the other people in the community on the East Coast. So I'd get up and I'd go to help people, and all the easy stuff was answered. So I thought, oh, great. So, somebody would just say, oh, yeah, hit this button, and then the ones that were left would require building tutorials and demos and all that. So I started to do that. But what was cool is I did that, and I was still doing my research project on that. Articulate ended up making me an MVP. And I didn't have anywhere near the number of posts or activity that other people in the community had. But the fact that I was actually helping people, and then all this extra effort in building these mock-ups and all that stuff, that I think the help was a little bit more value-added than somebody just answering a quick question. So I ended up becoming an MVP, which kind of then reinforced what I was doing for my research project. So in this short time, my whole focus with the communities of practice changed, and so we'll cover that. So what we're going to do is talk. That's a really long intro. I'm going to skip through all my slides. Now we're going to talk about communities, because I have to set that up because I'll reference that quite a bit. We'll talk about the communities. We'll talk a little about the people that are in the communities, because The challenge I find when I talk to people, it's kind of what we ran into on our research projects, is that we tend to try to build a community, but it really doesn't work that way. So we'll talk a little about that. And then I'll offer some tips and tricks and some of my experience with the Articulate community, which is, like I said, transitioning from a pretty active community to something that's new and all that change and everything that goes with it. There are a lot of challenges and a lot of things that just part of the community anyway. And so I'll kind of share some of the stuff we learned. So I kind of already touched on this here. So community is really, you kind of have to understand the way communities work. So community, if you can get past thinking about like your community or like say the Articulate community or whatever you're trying to build, community in a general sense, like say theoretical, it's really about expertise. So you have somebody who's an expert connects with somebody else who's an expert, and then they start sharing information. And then that sharing of the information, they develop kind of some norms that are part of how they do things. That becomes your practice. So that's why they call it communities of practice. This is going to save you about $14,000 if you're doing a master's on communities of practice here. So you've got that $100. See, it's going to pay for itself in one meeting. Now, this is a real condensed version of communities of practice. I'm sure Eddie Wanger would be rolling his eyes. But the thing is, you have experts and people who want to learn from that expert. They kind of get together and they just share and really learn back and forth. In that process of learning, in that process, they develop kind of a protocol or a way they do things. So that's really all community is about. And so it's that building of expertise and sharing and learning from each other. And that's kind of where I think companies, when they try to start communities, fall down because they lose sight of the whole organic nature of the sharing and learning from each other. Because as soon as a company gets involved, it's like, okay, how are we going to track this? How are we going to make you become part of the community? And then how are we going to, you're not part of the community, or maybe you joined it, but you're not active, so what triggers or mechanisms can we go in there to manipulate people so we can create the activity in the community? I used to work at this one place, and I was the low person on the totem pole, so I had to go to all these like meeting things that the organization had, and one of them was the recycling committee. And they already had like everything in place. They were doing all the recycling. And so I'd go to the meeting, and I was a younger guy, and they were all like older executive type people in this organization. And well, not all executives. The one who led it was the executive, and then like some other managers and stuff in there. But so I go to this meeting. It was completely pointless to me. And then all they would talk about in the meeting was how to get more people to the meetings because nobody was going to the meetings. So their whole strategy was, how do we get people to these meetings? So they would have meetings on that. But they never talked about recycling because the programs were already in place. And it's kind of how the communities work in organizations. They try to start communities, and then nothing's working, so then they create plans to coerce people to become part of the community. And then they struggle with, why is this not working? Then the companies give up on it, and there's really a lot of value, especially with the way social media and all that stuff works now. There's a lot of value in all of this, but it's how you approach it that has to change. But it's all about the sharing and learning from each other. Because a community is going to happen anywhere. You're involved in all sorts of communities of practice. At work, it's the chit-chat you have with your coworker about a project. If you go to church or something like that, it's that there's that common thing that you're learning. So there's all sorts of, if you're a hobbyist, I'm always fascinated. You see where we live at, every once in a while they have these like the RC cars and airplanes and all that. And they have like people in RVs coming out there, and it's like this whole cult of remote control vehicle operators, but they're all over the country, So you've got all these like little groups all over the place, and knitting groups and quilting groups, and those are all communities of practice. So we're all involved in multiple kind of overlapping communities. But it's all about that sharing and learning from each other. It's not about that structure. It's just that sharing and learning from each other. So the technology today is just a way to facilitate. I need to upgrade it with some more. I think half of those companies are probably out of business. But it's the technology is just a way to facilitate some of that, or it's kind of like building the freeway to make it easier to get from one city to the next. but it's not, because you put the freeway out there doesn't mean that you're going to have cities, right? The freeway is there to connect one city to the other city, but the cities exist because they're communities. So same thing with the technology. The technology is there to kind of facilitate and navigate the community and kind of connect with people, but it doesn't create the community. And that's, again, where one of the struggles organizations have is they figure, well, we've got a wiki, we've got a community site or something, we've got all this structure, we'll put it in place, and now we've got a community. And then the question is, how do we get people in the community? So it's kind of like how we make them captives to, we'll get them locked into the community, they can never leave, and then it's like they'll be listening to Eagles and Hotel California. Anyway, so the technology is just part of that. It's part of the way you can facilitate the community, but it's not the community, which is one of those key points. The other thing is communities aren't the same. So Articulate, we're a software vendor. Why do you think we have a user community, or we've invested so much in the user community?
Sell more software.
Well, then hopefully, but it's really not to sell more software. But why do you think Articulate's made this commitment in their user community?
You want them to use your software better.
Okay, use the software better.
To make them more user-friendly.
To make it more user-friendly. To be successful with the software.
You want us to be experts.
To be experts.
To build your brand.
To build a brand.
Drive up satisfaction with the brand.
Okay, satisfaction with the
We want
brand.
advocates from the bottom level.
What were we saying?
Save money on talent.
Save money on talent? What do you mean?
I mean, the people that work at Articulate don't have to have all the talent I mean, you don't have to pay for them to learn all the different things. Everyone is learning other ones.
Okay, so yeah, you've got that support, and then
A lot of times, somebody else said about the building